So I think we're going to get started. There'll probably be other people joining, but everybody's time is valuable. I'm especially grateful for Gloria Quinn, who is calling in from the great state of Vermont. I have a lot of personal experience living there myself, and I almost became a landowner in Vermont. Before I met my wife, Connie, I was actually engaged to another woman whose family owned a very large mountain in Vermont. And I constantly tease my wife and remind her that, I gave up a lot to marry her. I gave up that ownership.
You could have been a good connection for me up here, John.
Yeah, I don't think it's a place that anybody, well, I don't know. It's in the South Boylston area, across the river from the White River, and had to get up to the property up on a dirt road, but
Connie probably reminds you that you married up when you got her.
She does do that.
Yeah.
I think we're okay. We've
you seem okay.
Yeah, we've made it through 53 years.
Oh,
anyway,
yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. So Gloria, many of you know from here in Rhode Island, but she has some roots up in Vermont. It turns out that one of her, I don't know, I guess she's one of your bosses, Gloria, right? She's on the board.
Sure is. Parent board member.
Yeah, she, Susan Ewan is an old, a friend that we've known for many, many years. We won't use the word old, but we've known her for many, many years. And Connie and I have had a lot of contact with her over the years, over lots of disability related issues. And it was great to see that Gloria went there to work. So we've been doing this series now for just to kind of put Gloria's presentation in the context. And we've been hearing about a lot of different ways that individuals are being supported in their own homes, their own apartments, in different kinds of community-based arrangements that facilitate inclusion. And we've also heard from the West Coast from Joe Wykowski, who basically runs an agency that helps people find that personal home and then helps them get the support that they need to be able to live in that home. And so as we're wrapping up this series, I thought that we would go back to talking about that aspect of it, because I think we've learned a lot about what the landscape is in terms of real estate. But there's always a lot of questions about, can my son or daughter live independently? How would that be done? And there are ways to do it. And so I thought that we would try to, we would try to introduce somebody who's been thinking about this and doing this kind of stuff as a provider, just to kind of round out the discussion. So Gloria has agreed to talk about this from that perspective. I also asked her to talk a little bit about what are the barriers, what are the issues that maybe need to be resolved, or barriers need to be eliminated to make it not only easier to provide the support, but also barriers that may stand in the way because of governmental regulations and policies. So this is going to be kind of a free-for-all kind of night where we're going to learn things. If you have questions, Gloria will try to answer. She's got some of her ex-colleagues on who have helped her with some of this work. So I think without further ado, Gloria, tell us about your experiences and both here in Rhode Island and whatever you've seen in Vermont and even other places that you're aware of. They're kind of looking at it from the perspective of someone who's a professional in running organizations that provide long-term and pretty continuous support to people with disabilities. So Gloria,
Thanks.
where are you? I lost your.
I'm right here.
Okay.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I just wanted to get a sense. I see that there are some state leaders here, which is great. And I know some of you as family members, but if you're a family member, could you just raise your hand? And I definitely am assuming everybody else involved would want to either have supports residentially or support people residentially. So, and I want to also introduce some of my current, they'll forever be my current colleagues because I'm going to rope people into new projects as they know. Adam Keenan, who's laughing at me right there, and Jessica Wilcox, who's in the back, and Susan Raposo, who's on. These are folks from West Bay, and we've done some really creative work there. We're going to talk about some of that as well. So I've asked them to join in the conversation. So I just want to kind of just do a very brief overview. I have been in the field for 38 years. Like many of you have been looking at this and from different perspectives and vantage points for a long, long time and trying to figure things out. I've worked in 4 different states and it is always challenging. And I would say that the vast majority of organizations that I wanted to give a shout out to Jody Merriman too. Sorry about that, from Looking Upwards. In my experience, the vast majority of organizations they really strive for creative options for people, and many accomplish this, and many are kind of stuck in the models that follow the form of the funding the funding model, and it creates real limits that have been difficult for everyone involved. I worked in New Mexico and Maryland, and I would say probably the most creative states I've worked in have been Rhode Island and Vermont. And this is my second life in Vermont working, and I had 2 lives in Rhode Island working. So my favorite states and some of the work that I've loved the most. So in Rhode Island, I wanted to talk about one of the newer models. So I'll kind of go over things, and you can stop me or take me back to whatever model you think is most interesting and you want to talk about it a little bit more. There are 3 different interesting models here in Vermont. I'll end with those. And then I wanted to talk about some more of the traditional to the more creative models that we worked in Rhode Island. So apartment life, I know I've heard a lot about, you've connected and you've looked at housing and affordable housing. Housing is crazy in Vermont, just as it is in Rhode Island in terms of cost. We cannot find apartments up here. We cannot find homes to purchase. People who live in Vermont can't purchase because the prices are so high. Everything's been kind of out of people's reach. So there are some projects going on, but that's very difficult. But there are a lot of people who want to live in their own spaces, and they don't want to live with other people, or they want to live with just people that they choose, which all makes sense. And it changes over the life. Of course, I might want to live alone one year, and a couple years down the road, I meet somebody and I want to move in with them, or I want them to move in with me. So having circumstances that can become flexible for people in their lives makes a lot of sense as well. So just like at West Bay, a lot of agencies, many agencies support people in their own apartment settings, and traditionally not 24-hour supports. So I wanted to just kind of say in general, where I think people have the most success is where we focus on developing networks and connections and community. partnerships, which I think Plan Rhode Island, you've talked about that a lot, and there are a lot of processes around that that help to support that kind of work. Because one thing we know for sure, it's going to take more than just state resources. It's going to take more than just parental resources and one's own resources. We are for sure interdependent, and the more that we can rely on each other and create villages around everyone, the better it's going to be. You know about the in-home support, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what seems to be more traditional and probably talked about, unless you bring me back to it. But the model I like the most in Rhode Island that we've been working on and have had some real successes with is what we kind of call the shared managed or shared supports model. And it's the idea that in every single situation, every person, and it is way easier when that person comes with a village already intact. And so there are lots of resources that can come together in terms of people resources, friend resources, financial resources are always helpful in the form of investing in properties. The shared supports model can be uniquely designed in every single situation based on what everybody wants to contribute to make it work, tailored. And in the state of Rhode Island, I would say it's very fortunate because the leadership of Rhode Island right now is very, in my opinion, and these are all my professional opinions, I think you have exceptional leadership at the helm in the state of Rhode Island right now with Kevin Savage and his team. I think that they're really wanting to support some more creative endeavors for families, for people with disabilities and families that want to help people to design things more individually. I would say in general, the funding model is probably the most difficult thing about it, but I know that things can be changed. And what I would say is one person at a time is a way to change it. I would encourage, and I might be jumping around a little bit, so I apologize for that. So in one example at West Bay, which I'll ask Adam or Jessica to speak a little bit about if you're interested in hearing more. One family was very, very passionate about making sure that his daughter did not live in a group living situation, and he wanted to see something very different for her, and she expressed that herself in many ways. This parent was fortunately able to bring to the table financial resources in order to build a house for her, actually, and create it in such a way that it was going to be really the perfect environment for her and one other person who would be the great match for her home. It was clearly her home. It was clear that if she agreed to having a roommate and that match became apparent over time, that in the end, if it didn't work, the person who was going to be able to stay is the daughter, it was their daughter. So those kinds of clear points up front that can create agreements between family members or people who are sharing spaces is really important. But in this situation, we worked to design the design around having a live-in person who is going to be responsible for 5 to 6 evenings. And that meant overnight would be responsive to getting up. There were going to be monitors in place in her room, her bedroom, and this was all with the agreement. And in living area, this was all in agreement with the family and based on their preferences. And so the staffing for the 2 people who ended up living together, the match took a lot of time. I think it's really, and the match was made in heaven. It worked because they spent a lot of time together up front over time. And so it became really apparent again over time that this was going to work well for them because it means less disruption down the road. Roommates don't always work out, relationships don't always work out, but in this instance, it's been about, I want to say 4 or 5 years.
4 years. 4 years in February.
And so it's worked very well. And they brought their funding together so that we were able to construct staffing schedules, and also family took responsibility to having people, the daughter in this instance, come to their home. That helped to stretch what funding was there for staffing. And we were able to construct a schedule, a plan, and commitments where the family assumes certain responsibilities and we assume certain responsibility as an organization. In this instance, they didn't want to deal with staffing, but they made their values clear. That was built into the expectation. And, and there were certain limitations that we needed to adhere to. For instance, they may have wanted, I don't know, I'm trying to just make up examples now. Sometimes families can do certain things in certain ways with their family member. As a family member, you can do those things, but as paid staff who are working under a very specific set of standards and values, we cannot do certain things. So those kinds of conversations up front about what's going to work for the person are all really, really critical to ultimately making the whole thing work. Because I think what I want to emphasize, as a family member, I would want to find an agency that's going to really talk through everything with me, partner with me, and adapt everything based on my specs. I mean, we can't all do exactly what everybody wants to do, but in my experience, organizations that look at what the person and what the family is really wanting, when we look at it at West Bay, when we looked at it as how can we do it, not whether we can do it or not, but if we were going to do it, how would we do it? We had so much more success in helping to create success around what was going to work for everybody involved, and making it financially feasible is obviously critical as well. And I know Mary Beth, you would like to say something?
Can I ask you a question, Gloria?
Sure.
Because, so you mentioned that I understand the staffing part of it and ensuring that personalities mesh and that all of that works out. I don't think for families funding or purchase of a home so much is the issue as it is being a landlord. So when you think about, purchasing that home, it's the plumbing that leaks and it's the garbage that doesn't get taken out and who cuts the grass. So I don't want to interrupt what you're saying, but as you explain more of this, would you be willing to explain some of the dynamics of that? Because, I think of myself as an aging parent, and those are not, I wouldn't even mind buying the house, but taking on those additional responsibilities wouldn't be a good
Sure.
fit for my situation.
Sure. No, I think it's a great question. And I think it's an example of how things can be tailored. So, I'm going to invite Adam and Jessica to speak in a second, but in this instance, the family very much wanted to take care of the bigger issues with the house and the lawn and all those things. We thought they probably wouldn't, but in this instance they did. But we were prepared to take that on in that situation. It is a unique arrangement. We happen to have the facilities staff that could function in such a way if that was what was desired. Not every agency is going to be able to do these things, but I do think it's important when you're looking at what would the ideal situation as a family member, what would I want to assume control over? And then what would I be willing to have the agency do? And what are the things I'd want us to negotiate together? The more clear that you as a family and the person who wants that situation to be, the easier it is for organizations to try to figure out how they bring their resources together in a way to handle that. And Adam or Jessica, I don't know if you want to say any more about that or give some specific examples.
Yeah, I'd love to. In 2015 is when we were approached by the family. And I just want to say both of the people who are living in the home presently were not supported by West Bay before this situation. It was this situation that brought these individuals to West Bay. So the family, it took 2 years from 2015 when they approached us to the house being built and also for them to move in. So we had plenty of time to talk through everything. So we have a contract, and the contract is based upon all the agreements that we came to over that time about what they wanted. And they were very particular about what they wanted and what they wanted control over. And they were very particular about what they did not want control over. So we have that agreement and we both signed it. You know, we had the lawyers involved because you always have to have that level to make sure everyone is covered. But since we put that into place, there's been a couple of times where they've wanted to make a change and we've wanted to make a change. So we did. We came to an agreement about what the changes would be. We amended that contract, and everyone has been fine since. So I really think, to Gloria's point, it's very important that I understand if you're okay buying the home, but you don't want to handle the maintenance and the facilities and all that stuff. That would be something that we're looking at, and it can be tailored specifically for each family.
Just to add on to that, it's like, as a homeowner, the water heater breaks. There has to be home insurance that's purchased. Somebody has to pay the oil bill. All of that stuff that goes along with the gutters need to be cleaned, all of that stuff. And so you're saying that in the contract that you wrote up between West Bay and the parents in this situation that you're describing, that was all of that stuff was, so they were clearly the owner of it. They were paying the homeowner's insurance.
Yes.
They were paying for all of those, if the oil bill, the landscaping bill, all of that stuff, but that West Bay was in the operations management
and would pay the phone bill, and West Bay would pay the electric bill, and West Bay does pay the gas bill, although the family takes care of the maintenance of the furnace. So we have all of those things spelled out in such a way that there's agreement about if and when something happens, who's responsible for it. And that's been part of the give and take of the contract, making sure that we're meeting the needs of the individuals, but also the family, and then also West Bay. And it's building that trust and it's building that partnership so that we all kind of know exactly what we're all responsible for.
Have you done this before, or was this the first time that West Bay did this?
This was the first time that West Bay did this. And now what we're trying to do now is, it's tough because the model is a little bit different with every family because there's differences that each family wants. So we're working right now with a couple of other families trying to build this sort of same thing, but also building it a little bit differently.
So this was our brainchild, and this took 2 years. I think Adam may have said that. It took 2 years, a lot of time with working with the family, making sure that they really understood what they wanted, helping them to clarify what they wanted for their daughter, really getting to know the daughter, because Adam pointed out that we hadn't even known her at that point, and really getting to know the other roommate. We had heard about the other person who really wanted housing, and it was a meeting, and it was spending time together over time. We facilitated all of that. So it was a lot of upfront time. This is the other point. Not every agency is going to want to invest this time. We did this without payment. We did it because we were super excited about creating new partnerships and really working with families, because from my perspective, that is the way of the future for people with disabilities, that we're going to have to become the village together. I think the days of, as I meet a lot of younger families in particular, the days of they want to just place their child in a group home or even in a shared living situation and that's it, that's over, in my opinion. And I think that's the good news. I think that we want to become more creative. We want to partner together, and we want to help people to become as independent as possible in the ways that they want. And for families to be as involved as that they want as well. So there are some other interesting arrangements, but I want to just check in and see if there are any other questions about this or comments, and we can come back to it as well.
Sorry, go ahead. Whoever spoke, I'll be quiet.
Hi, John, it's Anne LeClaire. Gloria, I have a question of what from the state helped or got in the way of doing that? Because I'm very excited to hear about that. I didn't know about all of this and the extent. I knew you were doing some innovative things over there, but I would.
Well, it started with Carrie
So-
Sankey. Yeah, no, I think we have I think a pretty clear reputation, and this is also my reputation of being very upfront. And so when we do it one person at a time, the great thing about that is who wants to say no? When you have a person that you're working with and a family that you're working with, and they're saying, this is what I want to really do. This is the resource that I'm bringing to the table. And we really want to work together to figure this out. And this is the set funding that you have. When we went back and explained what we were able to create together, and it took a while, we kind of had the blessing, and then Kevin blessed it. And, we decided we're going to create more. And Kevin Savage, who is a wonderful, wonderful leader, said, yeah, we want to see more. And because my point is sometimes funding models and structures need to change to support, always it has been, that structures have changed to support what people actually need in their life. And I think the more that we can push for those adaptations, the more creatively the more people are going to be able to live the way they want to. And so I would say it was very supportive, that we kind of had the blessing. And I think what was important was I told them what we were doing every step of the way. And so it really meant the state was kind of in on the innovation. They really wanted to see what could happen. They wanted to see if something different was going to be able to come out of it. And, and it did. And as Adam said, he and Jessica are working actively with at least 3 other families right now in the design process. And there's different timing for people as well. And again, I don't know if you want to say any more about that, Adam, but I would say in every single situation, it's very unique. And that's what it is. Everybody's life is very unique, and it should be designed that way. I think agencies will get to the point where they will want to, I think many do, want to really partner uniquely. And our services, how we provide services become, we adapt them based on what the services are that are really needed. And it's rather than the other way around, is the way I see it. And I think it's the way it's going to go more and more.
Gloria,
Greg?
so this is,
Yep.
Hi. I have 2, by the way, I have my son Zachary is 40, my daughter Eliza is 37, and they both receive services from Perspectives, and have for, let's say, the last 15 years, or a little bit more than that. And they both live in group homes that are run by Perspectives. And so I'm very interested in alternative models to group homes. I mean, the thing that you described is like the optimal thing, where families have enough resources to build a home, and that's terrific. I mean, but there's a lot more families that would love to be able to plug into something that resembles the village that you talked about, but don't have the resources to build a home, or even to buy an existing home. And so can you talk at all about that it's like, for those of us that don't have the means to replicate the situation that you've been focused on and describing?
Yeah, I mean, I would start with saying that we have come to realize, and I'm still saying we as if I'm at West Bay, because we is up here, Vermont for me, and that is we have some very interesting stories to tell as well. But in terms of West Bay, I would say one of the things that Adam, Jessica, and I are finding and have been finding is that though not all families have housing resources, many families do. And what they're looking for is a great housemate that would be usually one who would be a good match. So we were finding ourselves in almost this matchmaking position. And I think it's probably still going on, where what they're doing probably still is now starting to introduce people. They know the family who has the son who wants to live in his own home. He has the home, but he needs a roommate to share expenses, because that's what as adults we all need. And we now know another family who has the need and has the desire, but doesn't have a house. So I almost wish there was this receptacle. I mean, right now West Bay is the receptacle, but where there is this way that we could help to join people with what resources are there. So everybody can bring something to the table. In this one situation that we are referring to, you're right, it was ideal. A family who had great financial resources, the drive, the passion, the wherewithal, and they found the agency who was willing to create something with them. There was another family who had a sister who really didn't like where she was. Who knew it was going to be a match made in heaven? It happened to be. We thought it might be. We wanted to connect them. And that's in part of the village. You know, that the talking, this is a village, you know, the Plan Rhode Island, where we can talk. I think it would make sense, and maybe it's already happening, where we bring to this table and say, here's a person, they have this resource, they're really looking for something long-term. I think that it's the matching of resources and people potential and families. And I think it's the agencies that will help to facilitate that process. Or they don't even have to be the facilitator, who are willing to come to the table. I think there are many more agencies that either are or will be willing to do that. Right now, West Bay has been willing to take on a very facilitative role because we've had a very strong vision about it and strong passion about it. And we can see that it's very viable in many ways.
One thing that I would say is, and then I'll stop talking because I don't want to.
No, it's fine. These are all, these are great.
I have a match. They're my son and my daughter. You know, it's like finding a place for them. Then they like each other, and finding a place for both of them to live together. So I already have a built-in match, but I don't have the means to build them a house. And
so let me jump in here, Greg.
yes.
One of the things that we have learned from many places, many ways, is that in reality, you do not have to own your own house to get that kind of support. There are plenty of subsidized low-income opportunities for people to rent. And one of the points of this whole series is to let people know that if they plan early enough and carefully enough, this dream is possible. You don't have to own the house to be able to afford the, you know, all of that house management issues. You know, when you live in subsidized housing, it's 1/3 of your income. If your income is $750, like it is for many people, that's only $250 per person. So it is actually affordable. Don't let that be a barrier, other than recognizing that this may take a little longer. But just to piggyback on what Gloria said, this kind of living and this kind of effort requires a lot of planning, and it's okay that it takes you a couple of years, because it may take you that long or longer to put everything into place. Just today, I was talking to a mother from Wisconsin who has a profoundly disabled son who is living in an apartment, but he requires 24/7 care. And we all know that Medicaid does not provide that amount of support to anybody unless it's very unusual circumstances. And but with enough planning and coordinating and working with a lot of people, it is doable and is being done all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with John, and I think it's all a challenge, but I think it's all also achievable. So I think looking at what funding is there, you know, for families who want to self-direct those resources, I think that's great. For people who want to be in shared living situations, I think that's great. So we know that those are options. And so this is not a value judgment from me on anything other than to say, I think we should be able to be as creative as people want us to be, and with the resources that they have and the kind of life they have.
So can I just say, sorry, this is
Yeah.
Michelle Brophy. I put my email address in the chat. I've been kind of working in the housing world for 25 years now, and I work at BHDDH now with Ann. So I've been attending all of these series and kind of collecting the resources and working with the various agencies like West Bay and looking upwards in perspective. So I've just been having parents connect with me, tell me what they're interested in. If you have the resources, then we can work with that. If you don't, then there is subsidies like John talked about, where you could either rent an apartment in the community. There's a lot of choices. And the one thing I learned, and Gloria repeated it again today, is really taking it one person at a time, because everybody's situation is different. So you can feel free to reach out to me and we'll set up a time to talk, and we can connect you with the different housing resources out there in the community too.
That's great, Michelle. Thank you. So it's so fortunate. And that's what I mean. I think everybody here is in a really fortunate place. I think Rhode Island's a good place to be in there. It's going in a good direction. And I think there are going to be a lot of new options for people. I think it's really tricky figuring out how to use the funding creatively. So for staffing or supports, I think that is very challenging. And before I move into some of the new things I'm learning, some of the new, I don't want to say models, but I'd say structures of support that exist up here in Vermont, because I think there are some fun new things that I'm finding that could be helpful to learn about. But I want to see if Adam and Jessica want to say any more about the shared supports models.
Hello. I just wanted to respond, Greg, in some of your comments about not having the resource or the means to purchase the home. One of the things that we are working on is we have identified a person of interest who has actually come to us and said, I can purchase this house. I can create the home to have all of the needs that you have. He would be the landlord. We would rent the home from him. The difference with that is that, he's still looking for affordable renting, but if it's cheaper to subsidize some of your son and daughter's rent, as opposed to purchasing the home, this would be another option. He would be the landlord, you would pay the rent, but you would have that option to create this living environment for your children. So there are people out there that are interested in this and are willing to explore it. It does still mean you have to look at it a little differently when it comes to the financial rental cost. I mean, every obstacle we come to is that affordable housing piece. But if you as a family member have the ability to assist until the vouchers come in, that might be a great way to help make it move forward. Because this person that we have had conversations with is able and willing to accept the vouchers when they become available. So I think it's just finding some people who are interested and committed and willing to work with you to create these opportunities. And then you can still work on the other end. You can still work on getting the vouchers and the other pieces to secure it for the longer term vision.
Yeah, and I just
The
want
other
to
thing- Oh, go ahead, Adam.
we were talking about, Gloria, I just want to tease you for a second. We were having conversations with family today. We were talking about the exact same things that you were bringing up. Are you listening to us here at West Bay? Do you have the place mic'd? Because
I think you're listening to me is what it is.
Oh,
It was like verbatim. Everything you said is exactly what we just had a very long conversation about. So it is,
We're consistent thinkers.
And it really is about finding people who have similar interests and pairing people up and giving them that opportunity to meet each other and see where it goes from there.
And
Yeah,
I would just say that it is not absolutely necessary for everyone to be paired or to be grouped in any way.
That's right.
We should be able to support individuals too.
I was just going to go into the next thing I wanted to share.
Good, go ahead.
John, which is really about supporting people who want to be on their own and or with a partner or roommate. One of the interesting models that exists up here in Vermont that I'm learning a lot about, so I can't take any credit for it other than I think it's a great model, and I'm looking to kind of dip into it. And it includes what we all know we can use a lot more of, and that's technology. If COVID hasn't taught us anything, the silver lining is that we can be much more open to technology assisting us in ways that maybe we hadn't thought about before. And technology is cheaper. There's a lot more range and variety. And so there is what's called Safety Connections up here in Vermont. I don't run it. I can't take credit for it, but I can bring somebody in to speak in more depth about it if this is something you want to hear more about on another call. It is a way of supporting people, and it's a way of stretching those support dollars. So I said that support dollars, it's always the hardest part from my perspective. How to stretch it in a way that's going to support people with the kind of life they want in the way they want it. I think you need the village. I didn't think other people need to be involved in that. A friend who's going to take somebody out to the, to the recreation activity or the church service or whatever. I think we need all those things. But this covers evenings, the overnights, in a way that people can feel safe and assured, and that way it helps to stretch support dollars that someone receives from state funding. So with Safety Connections, what they do was they have it set up so that there is an on-call person for whatever the group is, whether it's 20 people, 40 people, 60 people, 5 people. There's an on-call system. There's a monitor who monitors all of the technology, whether it's alarms or whether it's actual monitors in the home, whether it is, a bed alarm, whatever it is, they monitor that so that if something goes off or the door opens, they can call the person and say, is everything okay? Oh, I just let the cat out or let the cat in. Okay, everybody is fine, that's great. And then there's a responder who's connected so that in the area, if an alarm goes off or there's something going on with the monitor and the person who is actually monitoring that doesn't get a response, they call the responder in the area who's going and in the physical is checking in on the person. This is something that becomes cost effective to do, and I'm trying to talk West Bay into doing it, so I'm glad Casey came on. I think it is such an amazing opportunity for people who really want to live more independently, who can be safe with some extra support or access to support. And I know there are agencies that already do this in different ways. They might have somebody on site and there are about 5 apartments and they're available in that way. I think that's all great. I think there are lots of different variations to this. But I think that working with agencies that are going to start to use technology as part of the support system, and I'm pretty sure Rhode Island's trying to figure out the funding around this, and so is Vermont. Vermont has figured out some of this already.
And Gloria, Ohio's doing it as well.
Ohio is as well. Okay, so I think we want to be looking at the states that have figured out this method because of funding / because it's always about how does it get funded? How do we create this? And then we're able to utilize it in a way that everybody says, okay, it's safe. If it's gonna work as that access point, not to use Tom Kane's verbiage there. So I think there are ways of using it, and that has been hugely successful for many people who others did not think they could be independent. For people who have a lot of difficulties living with other people, that they just have such issues that they need to have their own space and presence so that they're safe for themselves and for others. It's worked very, very well for folks with that kind of description as well. So I'm going to be finding out a whole lot more about it. We're going to be looking to create some of that here in the agency that I'm with. I'm with Upper Valley Services. For anybody who saw Bill Ash when he was in Rhode Island speaking and sharing, he retired and I stepped into his position here. So Upper Valley Services happens to have absolutely no group living. I don't have any problem with group living. I just want to say that. It's just that what I think we should do is have all kinds of options, the whole continuum of supports for people. And I think we should be able to make uniquely designed situations work for people who want to live a life that is their version of living a life based on the resources that we can bring together. People resources and financial resources and lots of creativity and duct tape, I think sometimes makes it work. And that it changes over time, that things we might start with one design and move into another design because it's through the experience that we learn so much about people. And if you have a good partnering organization that's willing to take that journey, going back to the initial example we were using, it was a 2-year journey of figuring that out. That was not easy work, but we were so in it with the family. We were passionately aiming for the same thing that we were able to figure it out. And there are sometimes bumps in the road, but we're still all willing to stick with it together and keep working it through. And I think that's what we all want. It's a relationship just like anything else. It's forming a community and a relationship. So there is another unique design up here in Vermont that I think is much more cost effective and is happening. And I tend to be a person who keeps checking in on things to make sure it's really working for people. So I want to make sure it's safe. I want to make sure it's good. I want to make sure it's solid. So I'm still kind of checking in on it. But I will say it's made life, it's helped people to become independent because it's way more affordable with the supports that people have. So we know that shared living is contracted services. And everybody here is familiar with shared living, correct? So I don't have to talk about the host home model, which lots of people love. It's great life outcome for many people, but not for everybody. For people who want their own space, one of the ways that it's worked here through UVS for some folks who wanted to be in their own places, we created a contract with a manager, so it is not an employee, and the manager then contracts with, they manage the staff that come in and support the person in the way that they want it. It is a way of having a very focused on one person situation that needs round the clock supports, but is much less expensive than the staffed model. My employees that have a lot of add-on expenses, it's a different way of making it happen. Now, that didn't happen because people at UVS thought, oh, this is going to be a better model. They did it because the funding was so tight. But what the person really, really needed was his own place to be safe and to keep other people safe. So in this situation, a contracted manager who creates contract staff worked really well. I know there is somewhat of a similar situation. It's not different. It's slightly different than one of the examples Adam, Jessica, and I were talking about, where a family is self-managing. They hire somebody who's managing and who's working with all the staff. It's kind of the same thing, only the agency is kind of driving it and setting up the contracts and creating those arrangements. Similar to that is, and I found this a little bit more interesting, is someone who wants a roommate, who needs a roommate to share expenses, finding like a college student who is considered a professional roommate who likes shared living. It's set up as a tax-free stipend because they've done 4 nights a week. They're contracted and then they contract any other supports, and they're kind of managing the whole thing. So they're the roommate, they're the housemate, and they're also kind of coordinating supports. So that's kind of another interesting way that becomes much more cost effective and also has somebody very committed who's a part of that person's life, who's going to be assuming some of those responsibilities. And it's a way of the agency, again, really kind of helping to influence I think it's like a way of influencing a certain set of values and expectations around the outcomes of that arrangement. Now, a family can do that self-directed, but a lot of the families I've met, they don't want to be dealing with the day-to-day. They want to be actively a part of the person's life, but they don't want to be dealing with the day-to-day. Some families do. They want to manage the whole thing, and I think that's awesome. So I think it's a very unique decision for each person with disabilities who wants and needs to have supports in their life to live the way that they want to. And I think it's a very unique decision for each family member who's trying to carve something out that is different from the typical models that are offered. I think all models are great. Again, there's lots of people have great lives in group living. Lots of people have great lives in shared living and in independent living. But there are lots of people who have more unique situations that need more intensive staffing or support that don't easily fall into an independent kind of situation. But I think there are ways of doing it. And the technology, I can't emphasize enough, finding a way to tailor that in to the support model, particularly, I think for many people in overnights, it creates a lot of extra room because those overnights eat up a lot of staff support time that are so critical for other periods of time to help people have the kind of active lives that they want. So I have a couple of other things that I wanted to share, but I want to stop there and see if Jessica or Adam have anything else that you want to kind of chime in about. And then Connie, I see you're raising your hand.
Right. Gloria, you're a person who talks with other people, who goes to conferences, who reads the journals. What else is out there that you are just itching to try?
What I'm really itching to try and what I've really loved, to tell you the truth, is what they're doing at West Bay. You know, we're going to be doing some of that. I think it's really important to tailor for every single situation, finding out what people really want the most in their life. How does it look? How does the family see it as well? What resources people are bringing to the table? Who's their circle? Who are the committed people in their lives that it can also help to contribute and invest in a different arrangement so that when it starts to come together, the person is really well supported moving forward, not lonely, and really accomplishing what they want. So I'm really excited about that. I think, to me, I think it is so exciting to look at every single arrangement differently. I'm so not about models. So I'm laughing because I never use the model word. I'm using it today because people tend to focus in, we're going to learn something about this structure and this structure. I think every arrangement could and should be different. And I think it can be. And I'm worried when John talks a little bit about what are the barriers. You know, I think Rhode Island had barriers, but I think they're moving beyond the barriers with this whole funding mechanism, because you have such committed people who are willing to help move the barrier. So I think ultimately it's all about people and commitments to people with disabilities. It's about leaders who are willing to figure it out, and families who are willing to keep pushing the edges, and people with disabilities especially who are willing to say, this isn't going to do it for me. I want something different. And those joint commitments, I think, are what make it happen. I'm worried in Vermont, I'm going to say, because Vermont, you may or may not know, is moving down the same payment reform move that Rhode Island went into. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me. And I say that because Vermont has a very unique person-centered methodology already. And the budget allows for things like a portion of a person's budget. If they want safety connections to be their access at night because it's going to save them a lot of money and they get to live in their own apartment, they can make that decision right now. Technology, it's already there. They're already able to do it. They figured it out. and they're able to say, yeah, we'll do the contracted services instead of this. I'll move this around in my budget to make it work. So I am very focused on how the design is going to happen so that it can continue to support these really creative avenues. I think it is essential. And sometimes I think people are not aware, people who really do value with people with disabilities and families and what they want. I'm not sure they're always aware what they're getting themselves into or how it's actually going to start to create boxes and limits.
Can I recommend, if you know anybody in Wisconsin, particularly in the provider world, you probably want to talk to them. They're now in a managed care model, which is even, sounds at first, it sounds like even more difficult to deal with. But they seem to be able to figure out how to, even within that structure, to still be able to provide these very individualized, personalized things. I know a
I
parent.
think it's about the design and the people, and I will do that. I'll reach out through Anchor. I'll reach out because that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So I think they could initially be barriers. So kind of getting back to Rhode Island, what initially was kind of a barrier does not have to become a barrier. And I think there's already movement to create more flexibility. And I think we've heard some of that tonight already. And I feel really fortunate that I'm coming into a state that has been all about flexibility and person-centeredness, though I would say the model has primarily been shared living. And so getting back to what am I really excited about? I'm excited about 3 families that have come to UVS with young adults as family members who are saying, we don't want that shared living thing. We're not interested in that. We want our own apartments and we want to have a job, and they already have a job, and an active life in town,
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to create. And it's going to be much around what we've talked about, this whole shared supports, shared resources. I think that is the most interesting way to go. And it could be Section 8 housing, or it could not be, it could be that I have a voucher. Maybe I don't, maybe I find a roommate and it's about a match. I think Karen, was that you? Yeah. I can't hear you though. I think it's on mute. Still not able to hear you, I'm sorry. Can you type it in?
While she's writing that out, Gloria, I know Catherine Taylor had her hand up a little earlier. Maybe you've already addressed. Oh,
Typed a question.
No, not me. I was just thanking Michelle for putting in the link and lighting a fire under me.
So I'm on the wait list site. What do I put for preferences? Is that your question?
No, that was Karen and Marty's, and I'm really interested to hear that. The answer to that.
Sorry about that. You know what? Since you're asking for Rhode Island, I wonder if Anne can respond. If the priority is to come up with adapted, I'm assuming this question means I want something a little different. I want it to be adapted. What do I ask for? Anne or Michelle?
Are you talking about the central, you're on the central waitlist website?
Yes.
And they talk about preferences out there. I'm trying to go back because I was on there doing this with someone the other day. I think it talks about disabilities. Yep, you can check disability. The reason they're asking you this is because they have mainstream vouchers, which are basically the same as housing choice vouchers, except for the fact that they're for people with disabilities only, ages 18 to 62. So you still get on the housing choice voucher list, but if more mainstream vouchers came up, the list might move more quickly. So this is for anyone. It's really just for people with low income. So like if somebody doesn't have a disability and isn't a veteran or isn't homeless, or then
anyone can apply as long as you meet the income eligibility. So for a preference, if it's disability, you can just check that box and answer it for your adult child, so that your adult child would be the head of household. They're not talking about you. When you talk about income, it's for that one. It's for your adult child as the head of household.
Did that answer the question?
But
Okay,
anyone
good.
can call me offline or email me, and I can help you with this.
Yeah, we have two things we need to address. One is the lack of affordable, accessible housing. And then the other is, how do people get the services they need to live the way they want? Gloria, you've done a great job at outlining different options that we really need to explore more in Rhode Island. And especially the technology, like you're talking about the technology stuff. The other place,
Technology can go such a long way.
the Coleman
Really
Institute,
can.
were you at the thing Tony Antosh sponsored a few years ago that brought in?
No, we had some people from West Bay that were there, but yeah, I was
So
not.
it's right in what you were talking about. And the Ohio people were talking about just what you were saying. Some people don't want to be around other people. And lo and behold, when they're not around other people and they have the technology option, their behaviors went way down.
Yeah, I mean, we all cope differently. We all need different levels of space and interaction, all of that. Yeah. And I think that's the case for so many people. I'd say the coordinated effort around the technology, figuring out the funding is one piece. The other is how to create coordination around it so that it becomes really effective, efficient, and responsive. Because otherwise, I think it could be dangerous. That's just me. I'm always wanting to make sure everybody's safe. Jody, did you want to say something too?
Yeah, I just had a question. So how in Vermont, how is someone able to access, if they were in a roommate situation with a professional roommate, how do they access the contracted staff, like the funding for it? Does it come out of that roommate stipend, or is there additional funding? For some of the safety connections, how is that funded? Is it funded through some plan from the state, or?
So there's an equity process, which a collaborative group of people, including people with disabilities, providers, family members, and state people, review the plans to make sure that they're as efficient as possible. So there is a general range based on what the needs are, what people have coming in, what the context of their life is, and they're able to arrange it in any way that they think they can creatively address with the agency, the organization they're working with, to address that. And so in this instance, the staffing line will accommodate the contracted services that will be paid through the ISO. So it's all allowable in creative ways. It's just, it is specified how the budget is going to be used, and how this person uses that budget looks very different from how the next person will use their budget. Some will maybe be staffed and might live with 2 other people. There aren't many of those here, and I think there's only 3 group homes in Vermont. But it's very uniquely designed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So it's what's allowable within the budget that is specified to meet the needs.
How do people learn how to develop their budgets?
So I would say, how do they do that? Some people know more what they want in terms of this is the resource and how they want their resource to look. And I'd say the partnering agency is the one who's working with them mostly, or the family who's working with them to understand that if they want certain set of supports, safety connections, for instance, that's an easier way to go. Safety connections is going to cost this much. It used to cost $20,000 per person. That's a lot, but it's still more economical. For most people now, it's $5,000 for that same access because there's more. So if a person says, if I have the safety connections, I actually get more hours to do what I want during the day, that becomes practical way to understand it. And so I think, you know, they're working with the agency and the family to look at what the arrangements could be and then making decisions around what's going to better work for them.
So are they developing the budget and then presenting that to the state, or is the state giving them a certain budget and they got to work within that?
There is a range. So I feel sad saying this because it's going to change soon, probably. There is a range of expected, based on the needs of the person, there's a range that it's expected to support that person. But that group, the equity process, really looks at the context, what their needs are, what they really want, and how they can use funds within that range. So they'll go in asking for a set of funds. The equity committee may actually say, well, maybe a little less of this consultant here, or a little less of this clinical, or a little less of this, to bring the budget down. But they're really asking for what they think is the most affordable way, based on the range that they tend to be able to get, which they have kind of a guide. And the person and their family will make decisions with the agency around what the agency thinks that they can do. I want to say again that primarily shared living is the way of the land here. But there are also many other arrangements that are being made because people either need or want something very different. And the equity process, I don't know if that will happen down the road because we're in payment reform design mode. And, you know, I'm going to try to influence it, as are other leaders going to try to influence it, to ensure that creative options can continue to be generated from those funds.
Thank you, Gloria.
Welcome. Are there any other questions? Or Adam, Jess, do you want to add anything more?
Casey has his hand up.
Gloria,
So-
would you mind, please?
Oh, go ahead, Casey.
I just wanted to let everybody know that if you're interested in seeing some of the demonstrations we saw at that conference that Ann talked about, it's on YouTube. It's an organization called Rest Assured. You can find their videos on YouTube about how their system works out there. And because Ohio is a tech-first state, I believe for billing, they implemented a specialized billing code for that setup in cooperation with the organization like Rest Assured who sets it up. I just wanted to add that I was very excited after seeing that equipment, and I contacted Rest Assured and they were very helpful. But at that time, the system they've set up is proprietary. And so one of the hurdles we have to overcome here is to design a similar system that has the same functionality, but we'd have to start from ground zero. Rest Assured is more than welcome to deal with you, but you have to buy into their monitoring services, which are located in Ohio. And I don't think it's as sophisticated as the system that Gloria spoke about, which has a runner, someone close by to do something. But so with that said, I have started scratching the surface looking at how we can get an integrated system, but you'd be surprised how little, as much as you might use your home Amazon Echo for something and you think it connects to so many things, in terms of what people need, it really needs a lot more functionality and ease of use. First, that's the other thing. You can find a way to communicate with people, but often the ease of use is just not there for individuals.
Yeah, Casey, we should talk and see if there are grants we can go after as a state and partners like the Coleman Center or others that can come in and help us develop that if we have to develop it from scratch.
I agree, or even approach New England Tech with a grant if they can design
that'd be
something.
great
I
too.
agree,
Local
and let's
program
talk.
would be good.
Sure.
For those,
I would encourage you. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, for those of you who are older, you might remember that both at URI and that State University in Massachusetts in New Bedford, both of them have engineering programs that have developed lots of assistive technology gadgets and stuff over the years. I mean, you know, like everything else, these kinds of technology resources are everywhere. All you have to do is start saying, we want to bring people together. I mean, I see, for example, smart homes, big deal in the veterans world. There's just a lot of that stuff going on. And I think we're going to need to encourage someone group of people within the provider community to say, okay, we're going to do that. One of the things that I would love to see happen is a little bit more specialization. Our providers often are, jacks of all trades, and maybe we need some experts in some specialties, and that might be an area where.
We've been talking about that for a few years in our system, John.
Yeah, we just need to start doing something. Now, can I just ask one question from you, Gloria? Shared living. So my sense, again, this is only my sense, and I may not be reflecting this correctly, but my sense is that our shared living regulations are unnecessarily restrictive and kind of inflexible. It sounds like Vermont's are a little bit more flexible, allowing some more creative solutions. I guess I would like to kind of make the pitch to everybody here in Rhode Island that we need to like rethink that a little bit and make it much more user-friendly and more flexible than it is. I'm just amazed that, organizations like, I can't think of the name of it now, but that group, Joanne Melise runs, it's based in New Hampshire, and their
Living Innovations.
Living Innovations. Their practices are different from what they are here in Rhode Island. And Living Innovations up in New Hampshire does stuff for elders. There's just a lot more potential in that model than we seem to be using here. And I really want to encourage us to.
I would just add that the agency that I'm with right now also operates Comforts of Home, which is providing host homes, and similarly for elders or anybody else who is eligible for nursing home placement. So it is more flexible, it is adaptable, and it can be wonderful and also not for everybody.
Right.
So just to say that I think investing in flexibility in just about every model is really important. I wanted to just say the safety connections people, you guys might want to check into, and I can get a contact for the Howard Center as well, because I think that what they have put together is exceptional and has worked so well for so many people. So I'm more than happy to put you in touch with someone if you want, or to even do another presentation here just on safety connections.
Well,
that model. If you wanted, I think they'd be probably happy to do that.
Is that also known, Gloria, as safety networks? Because we have talked a little bit about that in state.
My understanding is they kind of call it safety connections, but I'm, maybe there's a different term for it too.
Yeah.
I think safety networks started out creating circles around people with very serious illnesses who need support.
I think
one of the pieces around shared living, though, that I was going to also add, speaking of flexibility, is that there are some people who are so particularly challenging to support effectively for long duration, long periods of time, that one of the models that they have here is the joint shared living, where we have two shared living providers who share the same home and might be with someone for 3 days, and then somebody else comes in for 4 days. And that also is a pretty economical way of supporting the person to be in their space with primary caregivers that is less than a 24-hour staffed model.
Yep.
So that is another way.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because I have an idea. I'm glad Ann is on, so she'll hear this from me first. How about shared living on the weekends? For example, people have, families that they're living with, but mom and dad need a break, kind of a consistent break. What's wrong with thinking about providing shared living for the weekend so that that person moves to another place? it's also a possibility of testing out whether that's going to work. And then there are other people whose funding doesn't permit 7-day-a-week support, but why should they not have the opportunity to live on their own 5 days a week and then go someplace else? Or even, frankly, in our own case, our Mark, because we want him to, and he wants to, he comes back with us every weekend. It allows him to have all the independence he wants during the week. It allows him to do everything. It gives us the freedom that we need. But then he comes home on Saturday afternoon, and he spends the weekend with us, and then he goes back to his own apartment. I think that we need to be more creative about not only flexibility, but mixing ideas. I like you, I don't believe in models. There's no such thing as a model, but I think there needs to be enough of that flexibility to allow people to mix and match and not always just be stuck in either lane A, B, C, D, or E.
And use of respite dollars too,
Yeah.
families having access to respite dollars.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah, but as John said, we need to be more flexible in our definitions. Respite is very
Yes.
narrowly defined right now.
Yeah.
We do have siloed programs still, even though we have the global waiver. So shared living in DD works differently than shared living at DHS. And those things should be better coordinated and run the same way, really.
I'd love to.
Catherine, did you want to say
Yeah,
something?
I did. Thank you. And this has been an incredibly helpful session for me. I'm just so thank you all, and everybody's comments have just been really helpful. So what you were sort of your last bit you were talking about, Gloria, and then John really contributed to that. I sort of struggle to imagine a situation that would really work for my son, both for what he wants, which is his own apartment, which he needs a lot of support, and then thinking about the folks who would be supporting him, because right now, we live in a family with him and 4 other adults, and it's exhausting for the 4 other adults. And so I can't imagine, 1 or 2 other people supporting him. So I'm just thinking, if there are models that kind of, just have more people around.
You want more people?
Yeah. Or being able to swap people out. I mean, I really like that idea.
So for people to be able to take a break, you mean?
Oh yeah, lots of them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so between the shared living, that's more continuity, but in more the model that we were talking about earlier, the shared supports model, that's staffed, it's more expensive. But there certainly are more people, and there's a live-in as well. So there's some continuity, and there's people who get lots of breaks. The contracted managed situation, you have that one person, or even the professional roommate, where you have some consistency, but they get to have a break, and they're there 4 nights a week, and they're contracting supports so that there are people, a set of people who are pretty consistent, but the main person is there consistently and then gets the break and then can come back into it. So, and you would have the same thing with 2 shared living providers, 2 main caregivers. They both get breaks, and they hire the respite staff that are consistent people who are coming in as well. So I think there are a lot of ways to get at it. I think the great way to start, which is what you're kind of doing, I think, is to look at what's going to be the thing that's going to really work. And it's a start place. I mean, that's the other thing I want to emphasize. Sometimes families and providers, we think that this is the greatest idea of all, but we start with something and we start learning something a little different, and we design it differently as we go. So you want to have the model's going to transform to support the person perfectly, rather than here's the model and the person's going to have to fit into it, and this is just going to have to work. So if you have something that can be flexibly designed over time so that it's tuned for who the person is and who they're becoming, I think that's what you're really wanting. That's what I would want, you know, for my family member. And that's what I would want to give as a provider.
Yeah. So I think that then the other side, the flip side of it too is, you know, he gets attached, but he also likes a lot of variety. And we would just sort of churn through past workers when we could have past workers, and we had a different one every day of the week. And you knew Mondays were a Jonathan day and Tuesdays were an Ava day. And I just sort of wonder if, you know, when we put adult supports around him, whether that is a model that people have thought about could work, would ever find appropriate. So anyway, you've just opened my head up to a lot of different thinking tonight.
I think whatever works for the person is appropriate.
Right.
Like, that's the way I look at it. You know,
That's what we need to get to.
What did you say, Ann?
That's what we need to get to.
Right.
Yeah.
And I
Talking
would
about
also,
all this.
I would also add that all of us parents need to remember that our children change over time. As they experience life, life has an impact on them. And one of the things I've learned from this series that has been really reinforced is that we need to plan short-term, long-term, but even when we're planning long-term, don't fool yourself into thinking that you have finally figured out the solution for that 25-year-old who's going to live like this until he's 85 years old, okay? None of us have done that. You know, we've had many different experiences. We've lived with many different kinds of people, and there's no reason why we should think that people with even intellectual disabilities shouldn't have that opportunity. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that we need to be careful that we don't fix people into a spot and say, all done, and move on and assume that their life is going to remain constant. It's a rare person for whom that is the case.
I would
Absolutely.
choose the organization that is best matched to your family values and what the person's values are and what they're going to want throughout their life. Who's willing to kind of keep carving for things towards that, and also who has a great relationship, a committed relationship with state and other providers, because it's all really about the network and the community network. I'm sorry, Michelle, I think you wanted to say something.
Oh, yeah, I know it's getting close to 7:30, so I want to put in my plug again for Ann, myself, and Betty Murray. Will be holding our office hours like we always do. It's going to be the third Wednesday of the month, the same Zoom link from 6 to 7. But our goal of this, there's not an agenda. It's to hear from individuals and parents, see what you're interested in. So we've heard from people about the models they're interested in. So what everyone's been saying tonight, it's individual, taking people one at a time and trying to figure out what they want, what will work for them. So if you want to come on, I know everyone's busy. If you can't come on, you can send me an email and we'll find a time that works better for you. But that's how we're going to do this, is actually finding out one family, one individual at a time, what the need is, and then getting it done. So the office hours are the third Wednesday in April, and we will remind you of it next time on the call too.
I think it's great that you're both here, and you know, great. It's a demonstration of the Rhode Island commitment. So I think that's awesome. Are there any other questions or thoughts? And I'm more than willing to send resources John's way so that he can share it with everyone here. Mary Beth?
I just want to echo what Ann LeClaire brought up. And I think I see you on so many of the Zooms, and I'm so thankful that there is that continuity that you bring to each of these conversations. But the piece that she brought up about individual budgets, and for people to really understand this, my guess is that for people looking at housing, it's a little bit overwhelming. But I think when people understand individual budgets and how that you can use them effectively, I think it makes more sense to me how it's kind of like, what's the best bang for my buck now? Because what do I want to use it to create that pathway so that there's housing for, you know, it's hard to, you feel like you have to have a village. I could never do this on my own. So who is that agency, that entity that I'm going to build a relationship with, that I can feel assured that, okay, here's your part, here's my part, this is going to come together? Because, you know, relationships aren't always long-lived, people move on and so forth, and then you don't want somebody in a housing situation and that village kind of steps apart and you're looking for roommates or looking for whatever. The technology piece, how that works. So I just think that, you know, and I know the work that Ann is doing, but I think for people to understand how their individual budgets work and how they can use that budget to learn the things they need, so that as they move closer to whatever form of housing is a fit, you know, they can get there. I see this as a bit longer pathway than my kid needs this. Can we jump right into the ABCs of that? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Gloria, can I ask if you could share anything about how Vermont does the budgets? We have a group making recommendations around individual budgets and how to implement it. And I think it's going to take some work, not present it in a way that scares people. Like self-direction scares people. They like the idea of it, but when it comes down to trying to figure out how to hire their own staff and manage the scheduling and take care of all of that, it's overwhelming.
I think it is overwhelming. I think organizations like that was another piece that I wanted to say, that organizations can take certain pieces. Staff management pieces is often what I hear that families really, really want agencies to do. Everything costs something, you know, so figuring out what that cost is for what in particular the family it's most important to them, and then looking at what the resources are and then how you tie in together the shared resources, I think is what can make it work. The days of and I think we all know this, the days that a family says, here, I know you need to handle it state and everything should be handled by the state and the funding should allow for all of this. It's just not, I think that's long gone. I don't know if it ever really was real that way anyway. What was that?
Long gone, having a family member about to come into the system. It's, I don't want that kind of system.
Yeah, I mean, so it's that's like giving away control too. So there's
it's an institution in the community. It's really, it doesn't really change the mindset among everybody. You just change the location of somebody. So you do need that model, I think, where people can just hire somebody to manage those things that are overwhelming, because being able to do that, that's not efficient or effective for people.
Yeah, and this is Dave.
We need to start with what we want and then figure out how to pay for it, and not start with what we're going to pay for.
Yeah.
And figure out how to fit things into it.
One of the ways of thinking about that is that you don't have to run the money or the power or the or all the authority through a provider agency in order to accomplish that. You can contract with a provider agency, with a good, small, customized provider agency, to help with identifying and recruiting and screening and training staff, so that you don't have to do that, but at the same time you still retain control over who comes in your front door.
Agreed. You said that way better than I said it.
Yeah,
yes,
I did too. Thank you, David.
Yeah, that was succinct. Thanks, David.
So we've got a number of, there's folks know that there's about over 1,500 microboards operating in the United States and Canada, and a number of them have subcontracted with compatible small providers in their communities to do very, very specific kinds of things. And it's sort of like I contract with the Oceanside Chev service, service to take care of the mechanics of my car, but I don't run the rest of my family budget through them.
Yeah,
absolutely agreed. And I think so. The only thing I would want to say is that to add to that is for a family and an individual to really think about what they want help with and what they don't need or want help with. It's going to be really important It's just as important to the provider organization so that we can tune correctly. David, did you want to say anything more about that?
No, I'm shaking my head, yes.
Yeah, I complete agreement. Is there anything else that anyone wants to bring in? Any thoughts, questions,
Gloria,
comments?
how can we get in touch with you now?
I have her,
John's got my number.
I've got her number. Right.
Good,
It's
'cause
good
I'm
to, it's good to
imagining
see you both.
a summer
And-
vacation to Vermont to
Right.
look at
We'll come up with
the
something.
Vermont model with technology. No, the safety connections model.
Yeah.
Good.
So
I'll do that with you.
we're going to be coming up.
Fantastic.
I went to Norwich, so I went through Randolph and those places all the time. So I know that area very well. So
Perfect.
it might be worthwhile going up to there and seeing if those guys in their engineering and technology areas could be kind of.
I know that would be the right partnership, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So is there anything else? I just want to say thank you to everyone. It's always really wonderful for me to talk about things that I love the most, that I'm so passionate about, and to learn from everyone here. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you, Gloria. We really, really appreciate it. We're recording you. You're going to be a star soon. All kinds of places.
Yeah, hold out
I
for
don't
the
know
movie
about that. I'm a
rights, Gloria.
seeker. I'm always a seeker. Adam, Jessica, any last comments? Okay.
Nope, just thank you.
Okay.
It was great seeing
Thank
all
you,
of you.
Gloria.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Thanks, Gloria.
Thanks,
Great to see you
Gloria.
too.
Thank you, thank you.